Have you ever looked around your home late at night after the noise is gone, after the phone stops ringing, and quietly wondered to yourself, did I prepare enough for this stage of life? Not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Because retirement has a strange way of revealing things people spend decades avoiding. You finally have time, but maybe not peace. You finally stop working, but the stress doesn't completely disappear. And sometimes the fear gets even louder. Fear of running out of money, fear of becoming dependent on others, fear of losing purpose, fear of becoming invisible. Let me tell you something. Many people think retirement stress only comes from not having enough money. But after reading the book, The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins, I realized something deeper. A lot of retirement stress comes from complexity, too much confusion, too many opinions, too many financial products, too many people telling older adults what they should do. And somewhere along the way, people lose their peace. This book really made me stop and think, because underneath all the investing advice, underneath the discussions about index funds and financial independence, there's actually a much deeper message hiding inside this book. And the message is this: a simple life is often a more peaceful life. A life with less financial chaos, less debt, less constant chasing, less comparison, can become a life with more freedom, more calm, more dignity, more sleep at night. When I first picked up this book, I expected another complicated money book filled with charts, formulas, and financial jargon that most retirees don't even care about anymore. But what surprised me was how human the message felt. It didn't feel like a Wall Street salesman talking down to people. It felt more like someone saying, stop making life harder than it needs to be. And honestly, I wish more people understood these lessons before retirement, because many retirees today are carrying stress they were never supposed to carry this late in life. Some are supporting adult children while secretly struggling themselves. Some are living on fixed incomes while pretending everything is fine. Some worked hard for 40 years, only to arrive at retirement exhausted, anxious, and unsure what comes next. And you that is watching this right now, maybe part of you feels that way too. That's why I wanted to make this video, not to sell you a dream, not to promise overnight wealth, but to sit down with you, almost like two old friends having coffee, and talk honestly about what this book teaches about living a calmer, more financially peaceful life, especially after 50, especially after 60. Especially when peace matters more than proving something to the world. Why this book matters for retirees. You know, one thing many younger people don't fully understand is this: retirement changes your relationship with money. When you're younger, money often feels connected to ambition, career growth, bigger houses, new cars, status. But after a certain age, money becomes something else entirely. It becomes security, breathing room, peace of mind, the ability to sleep without panic, the ability to say, I'll be okay. And this is exactly why this book matters so much for retirees and older adults, because The Simple Path to Wealth strips away the unnecessary noise around money. It teaches simplicity. And simplicity becomes incredibly valuable later in life. Most retirees are not trying to become billionaires. They're trying to avoid stress. They want stability, predictability, freedom from financial confusion. But sadly, many retirees get trapped in complicated systems. Too many accounts, too many risky investments, too many fees, too many financial advisors talking in circles. And sometimes older adults become vulnerable because they feel overwhelmed and embarrassed to admit they don't fully understand what's happening with their money. This book pushes back against that confusion. It says something powerful. You do not need to make your financial life complicated to build security. Now, of course, some people reading this may say, well, I'm already retired, isn't it too late for me? And honestly, that's one of the biggest emotional struggles many retirees face. The regret of wishing they started earlier, wishing they saved more, wishing they understood investing decades ago. Be honest with yourself. How many people spend retirement replaying old financial mistakes in their minds? I should have invested sooner. I should have avoided that debt. I should have simplified my life earlier. But this book also quietly teaches another lesson people often miss. Financial peace is not only about how much money you have, it's also about how you think. Because I've seen retirees with modest savings live calmer lives than wealthy people drowning in stress. And why? Because peace doesn't come only from numbers, it comes from clarity. This book matters because it helps people stop chasing financial perfection and start focusing on financial stability. There's a difference. And most people don't realize this until later in life. The book also speaks to something retirees deeply need but rarely talk about openly: confidence, not arrogance, confidence. The confidence that you understand your money enough to make decisions without fear controlling you. That matters when you're older, especially when health issues arise, especially when inflation rises, especially when you start thinking about long-term care, family responsibilities, or leaving something behind for your children. And perhaps most importantly, this book reminds retirees that freedom is often built slowly, quietly, and consistently, not dramatically, not through gambling, not through chasing every financial trend. That message becomes more valuable with age, what the book is really about. Now, if I had to explain what The Simple Path to Wealth is really about in plain human language, I'd say this: it's a book about removing fear from money. That's really what sits underneath everything. Yes, the book talks about investing. Yes, it explains index funds. Yes, it discusses financial independence, but emotionally, this book is really about freedom. Freedom from constant worry, freedom from debt traps, freedom from living your entire life under financial pressure. The interesting thing is that the book originally began as letters from J.L. Collins to his daughter. And honestly, that changes the tone of the entire book, because it doesn't read like someone trying to impress people. It reads like someone trying to protect someone they love from financial mistakes. And that made the advice feel more sincere to me, more grounded, more practical. You can feel that the author is trying to simplify complicated financial ideas for ordinary people, not just rich people, not financial experts, ordinary people trying to build stable lives. One of the biggest ideas in the book is this: most people make investing far more complicated than it needs to be. Now, for retirees, this is important because many older adults become targets for fear-based financial marketing. People try to scare them constantly. You'll run out of money. You need this special strategy. You need this expensive product. You need to actively trade. You need to beat the market. But the book argues that simplicity often wins over time. Consistency matters more than cleverness. Patience matters more than panic. And that lesson extends far beyond investing. It applies to life itself. You know, when people are younger, they often think happiness comes from adding more income, more possessions, more success. But later in life, many people discover peace comes from subtraction. Less debt, less stress, less comparison, less clutter, less emotional chaos. And this book reflects that philosophy beautifully. Another thing I appreciated is that the author doesn't present money as the purpose of life. That's important, because retirement without purpose can become dangerous emotionally. Some people spend 40 years chasing financial goals, then retire and suddenly feel empty. No schedule, no identity, no direction. This book indirectly reminds readers that money is supposed to support life, not replace it. Financial independence is not the finish line. Peace is, freedom is, time is, health is, relationships are. That's what I believe this book truly understands. The biggest lessons I learned from this book. Lesson 1, simplicity reduces stress. This was probably the biggest lesson that stayed with me. We live in a world that constantly tells people things must be complicated to be valuable, especially with money. But the simple path to wealth teaches the opposite. Simple investing, simple habits, simple decisions. And honestly, that idea becomes incredibly powerful after retirement, because many retirees are tired, not lazy, tired of financial confusion, tired of constantly worrying, tired of trying to keep up with changing systems. This part really made me stop and think. How many older adults spend retirement overwhelmed by financial complexity they never truly understood in the first place? I've seen retirees with stacks of papers on their kitchen tables, different accounts everywhere, insurance products they barely understand, investment plans sold to them through fear, and deep down they feel anxious all the time. Not because they're irresponsible, but because confusion creates emotional exhaustion. The book argues that simplicity creates clarity, and clarity creates calm. That lesson goes beyond investing. It applies to everyday life too. As people age, they often realize peace matters more than impressing people. A smaller, peaceful home can feel richer than a large, stressful one. A simple lifestyle can feel more luxurious than constant financial pressure. Many retirees struggle with this because society trained them to believe bigger always means better. But later in life, many people discover simple can actually mean free. Lesson 2, financial freedom is really about control over your time. One of the deepest ideas in the book is that wealth is not just money sitting in a bank account. Real wealth is control over your life. That's powerful, especially for retirees. Because after decades of working, many older adults finally realized time was the most valuable asset all along. Not the fancy car, not the promotions, not the status symbols. Time, healthy time, peaceful time, meaningful time. I remember thinking about people who postponed joy for 40 years, always saying, one day I'll rest, one day I'll travel, one day I'll spend more time with family. Then retirement arrives and health problems appear, or loneliness appears, or energy disappears. This book quietly warns against living your entire life chained to financial pressure. And retirees understand this lesson deeply because they've lived long enough to see how quickly life moves. That is watching this right now. Ask yourself honestly, what does freedom actually mean to you now? At 25, freedom may have meant excitement. At 65, freedom may simply mean no debt, good health, peaceful mornings, enough money to live without fear, and people who genuinely care about you. That's wisdom. Lesson 3, most people hurt themselves emotionally by panicking. Now, this lesson applies strongly to both investing and life. The book explains how many investors fail not because the market fails, but because fear takes over. They panic. They react emotionally. They abandon long-term thinking. And honestly, this sounds a lot like life in retirement too, because aging can trigger emotional panic in people, health scares, economic downturns, inflation, unexpected expenses, adult children needing help, loneliness, loss. All of these things can make retirees feel emotionally unstable at times. And the book repeatedly emphasizes patience, staying steady, avoiding emotional overreaction. That's easier said than done, of course, especially when the world constantly pushes fear into people's minds. But calm thinking becomes one of the greatest financial skills later in life. I've seen people destroy their peace chasing quick fixes during retirement, risky investments, scams, get-rich-quick opportunities. Why? Because fear makes people vulnerable. The book teaches something important. Slow and steady is not boring. Slow and steady is often what protects your peace. That lesson hit me deeply because society celebrates dramatic success stories, but many retirees don't need drama anymore. They need stability. Lesson 4, debt quietly steals peace. Now, this part may make some people uncomfortable, but it's true. Debt carries emotional weight, especially in retirement. When income becomes fixed, debt can feel suffocating. Credit cards, loans, financial obligations that follow people into older age. The book strongly encourages avoiding unnecessary debt. And I understand why. Because debt steals flexibility, it steals sleep, it steals dignity sometimes. I once spoke with an older man who said something I'll never forget. He told me the day I paid off my house was the first day I truly relaxed. That stayed with me, not because home ownership guarantees happiness, but because freedom from heavy financial pressure changes people emotionally. Now, of course, life is complicated. Some retirees carry debt because of medical expenses, some because they help family, some because life simply became expensive. So this is not about judging people, it's about understanding the emotional cost of financial burdens later in life. And this book understands that well. Lesson 5, lifestyle inflation never ends unless you stop it. One of the sneakiest traps in life is this. As income grows, expenses quietly grow too. And many people spend decades increasing their lifestyle without realizing it. Bigger home, bigger bills, bigger expectations. Then retirement arrives, and suddenly maintaining that lifestyle becomes stressful. This book repeatedly emphasizes living below your means, not as punishment, but as protection. That's an important distinction. Many people think frugality means deprivation, but healthy financial discipline can actually create freedom. I wish more people understood this before retirement, because many older adults now feel trapped maintaining lifestyles that no longer match their financial reality. And emotionally, that can create shame, especially when people compare themselves to others. But comparison is dangerous, particularly later in life, because peace often disappears when people constantly measure themselves against neighbors, relatives, or social expectations. The book reminds readers that enough is a powerful word. Not everybody needs more. Sometimes enough is enough. And realizing that can completely change retirement. Lesson 6, investing is more emotional than mathematical. This may surprise some people, but after reading the book carefully, I realized investing is often less about intelligence and more about emotional behavior, patience, discipline, consistency. These qualities matter enormously. And retirees understand emotional discipline better than younger people in many ways because life has already humbled them. They've seen recessions, losses, unexpected hardships. They know life moves in cycles. The book explains that markets rise and fall naturally, and panic often causes more damage than downturns themselves. Now, obviously, retirees must be careful with risk. Every situation is different. But the deeper lesson here is broader than investing. Life itself moves in seasons, good years, hard years, unexpected years, and emotional stability becomes incredibly valuable as people age. Not perfection, stability, calm thinking, perspective. That's wisdom money alone cannot buy. Lesson 7. Freedom requires saying no. This was another powerful lesson hidden underneath the financial advice. Financial freedom often requires uncomfortable choices. Saying no to unnecessary spending, saying no to social pressure, saying no to keeping up appearances. And let me tell you something, that becomes harder than people think, especially for older adults who spent decades trying to provide for everyone else. Children, family, friends, community expectations. Many retirees secretly struggle because they continue carrying financial responsibilities they can no longer afford, helping adult children endlessly, overextending themselves, trying to maintain appearances. This book indirectly teaches boundaries, and boundaries protect peace. Sometimes the wisest financial decision is simply learning to live honestly, not perform for others. That lesson felt deeply human to me. What this book gets right about life. There are some books that give information, and then there are books that understand human behavior. The Simple Path to Wealth understands human behavior. It understands fear, temptation, impatience, comparison, and those things affect retirement more than many people realize. One truth this book understands deeply is that freedom matters more than status. Most people don't realize this until later in life. When you're young, status can feel important, but aging changes priorities. Suddenly, peace becomes more valuable than impressing strangers. Another thing the book understands well is that stress compounds over time. Financial stress affects sleep, health, relationships, mood, confidence, and retirees feel this deeply because the body becomes less tolerant of chronic stress with age. This book also understands that chasing more endlessly can become a trap, because there is always another thing to buy, another comparison, another level. But peace rarely comes from endless chasing. It often comes from acceptance, clarity, gratitude, and stability. I also think the book understands something profound about independence, not independence in the selfish sense, but the dignity of being able to support yourself reasonably well. That dignity matters emotionally later in life. People want to feel secure, capable, prepared, not helpless. And perhaps the deepest truth the book understands is this: money is emotional. People pretend money is only logical, but it's deeply emotional. Fear, pride, shame, security, identity, hope, all tied together. That's why financial conversations can feel so personal, especially in retirement. Things I disagreed with or questioned now. To be fair and honest, there were also parts of the book I questioned a little. And I think this is important because no financial book fits every human situation perfectly. One thing I felt while reading is that some of the investing confidence in the book may feel easier for younger people than retirees. Younger investors usually have more time to recover from market downturns. Retirees don't always have that same luxury. So older adults need to think carefully about risk, income needs, healthcare costs, and personal circumstances. Real life is more complicated than simple formulas sometimes. Another thing is that the book strongly leans towards simplicity in investing, which I respect greatly, but some retirees may still need professional guidance depending on their situation, especially people dealing with estates, medical costs, taxes, or complicated family responsibilities. So I wouldn't want someone to hear this message and think, I should never ask for help. That's not wisdom either. Sometimes wise guidance matters. I also think the book focuses heavily on financial independence, which is valuable. But retirement happiness involves more than financial independence. Some retirees have enough money but still feel lonely or disconnected or purposeless. Money solves certain problems, but it cannot replace meaningful relationships. It cannot replace health. It cannot replace emotional peace. And this is where real life becomes more layered than financial books sometimes acknowledge. Another thing I reflected on is that not everyone had equal opportunities financially. Some people face job losses, divorce, medical crises, economic hardship, caregiving responsibilities. So while discipline matters greatly, compassion matters too. Not everybody starts from the same place, and retirees especially deserve grace, not shame. How this book changed my thinking. This book changed the way I think about wealth itself. Before reading it, I think part of me still connected wealth with accumulation, more money, more assets, more growth. But after sitting with the ideas in this book, I started thinking differently. I started seeing wealth as emotional breathing room, the ability to wake up without constant fear, the ability to make decisions calmly instead of desperately, the ability to age with dignity. That's real wealth. This book also reminded me how dangerous complexity can become, especially later in life. Sometimes simplifying your finances is actually simplifying your mind. And many retirees need that peace more than they need another risky opportunity. One lesson that stayed in my mind strongly was this: consistency matters more than intensity. That applies far beyond investing. Small, steady habits matter. Walking daily matters. Calling loved ones matters. Saving gradually matters. Protecting peace matters. Life is often shaped quietly over time, not dramatically overnight. And for retirees listening right now, I think one of the most important things you can start doing today is this: stop defining yourself only by money. Yes, financial security matters enormously, but retirement also requires emotional preparation, purpose, community, health, peace, curiosity. Many people prepare financially for retirement, but never prepare emotionally. And that's why some retirees feel lost even after leaving work. This book pushed me to think about balance differently. Yes, build financial stability, but also build a meaningful life around it. A peaceful morning routine, friendships, faith, hobbies, family connections, purposeful living. Because eventually what people remember most is not account balances, it's how life felt. If I had to summarize the deepest lessons from The Simple Path to Wealth into simple truths retirees can carry with them, I would say this: money matters, but peace matters more. Complexity creates stress, simplicity creates clarity. Retirement is not only a financial transition, it's an emotional transition too. Freedom is not about impressing people. It's about sleeping peacefully at night. Debt steals more than money. It often steals emotional peace. Slow and steady decisions usually age better than emotional ones. Comparison quietly destroys contentment. Health becomes wealth after 60. Purpose matters just as much as financial preparation. And perhaps most importantly, it is never too late to think differently about your life. Not too late to simplify. Not too late to protect your peace. Not too late to focus on what truly matters. You know, one thing I've realized as I've gotten older is this: most people are not really searching for luxury. They're searching for relief. Relief from worry. Relief from pressure. Relief from fear. And I think The Simple Path to Wealth speaks to that deeper human need beautifully. Not perfectly, but honestly. And maybe that's why the message feels so powerful. Because underneath all the financial advice, it's really encouraging people to build calmer lives. Lives with more freedom, more intention, more peace. And if you that is watching this right now have made it this far into the video, I'd genuinely love to hear from you. What lesson about money or retirement took you the longest to learn? What changed your perspective as you got older? And is there a book that deeply changed your thinking about life? Share it in the comments. Your story may help someone else who is quietly struggling right now. And if you enjoy these kinds of thoughtful conversations about retirement, peace of mind, financial wisdom, and living well later in life, subscribe to the channel and join this community. Because growing older does not mean life stops teaching us. In many ways, the deepest lessons only arrive later. And remember this: a wealthy life is not always the loudest one. Sometimes it's simply the life where your heart is finally at peace.